So, welcome to another episode of Healing Money Talks. My name is Emma Lucy Wall, and as always, I invite you to turn your mobile phone onto airplane mode. Put the kettle on, make yourself a nice warm drink, find a comfortable place to sit and relax, and listen deeply to the conversation that's about to unfold. You never know what you might hear. So my very special guest today is Nancy Boyd. Nancy Boyd is a survivor, an award-winning writer, an award-winning consciousness coach, and thought leader. She's the author of Healing the Wanting, Make the Shift from Grasping to Gratitude. When she was growing up, Nancy was bullied for being poor, female, and different, but she found her way through to ultimate wholeness. And that's why she's so passionate about connecting people with their souls, where healing and awareness happens. Her goal is to reach and inspire at least 10 million people to make this world a better place. Mm-hmm. You're invited to join her in this mission from the place in your heart where joy lives. Mm-hmm. Nancy's another one of my speakers who I met through the work of Sarah McCrum. Having found her way to her own wholeness, Nancy recognizes pain in others and brings her wisdom and her experience to help others to heal themselves and the planet. Welcome, Nancy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm very happy to be here today.
So, Nancy, there were some very specific things that you want to bring to this conversation, which is about healing and the disconnection that we're suffering from as a species. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Right. I would be happy to. From my perspective and from my experience, so many of us can think that when we're hurting and when we're suffering, we're in some kind of pain, that we think it's just us. And we don't really realize that it's not just us. And the pandemic is a really good example of that, where we can feel alone with whatever's going on in our lives. And really, we're not, because in this way, whether we're ill or not, we know people who are, and we're certainly aware of what's going on, and possibly either being in denial of it or in fear of it. And either way, you can't ignore that it's happening. So that aloneness, sense of aloneness, tends to create a separation, a disconnect, which is not the only disconnect that we feel in life. Mm-hmm. So what I have observed over time is that some of the true sources of suffering, and many of the great teachers of ages will say the same thing, we suffer because we feel that we're not part of God, if you want to use that term, or we're not part of the universe, we're not part of nature. Yeah. And in fact, one of the specific ways that I truly believe that we suffer is that we don't understand that nature is not something out there around us that we look at, and we can appreciate it. It's beautiful, it's lovely. But what we don't understand is nature is a dynamic, intelligent presence, an intelligent being, if you will. And by understanding the relationship that we can have with that intelligence, it totally transforms what we see as possible and how we conduct our lives. So, for instance, if we believe that, and this by the way goes along with I was just thinking about the other day that you were doing something recently with the law of attraction, I believe. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've come to understand about the law of attraction is that when you believe that something is out there and you don't have it, and so you want to bring it in, you automatically, in that way of thinking, disconnect from your ability to get whatever it is that you think you don't have or that you want. So it's the absence of something, the lack of something, that causes the pain. Yeah. And if you only could realize that whatever it is that is missing, whether it's the soothing or relief from suffering in some cases, that's not out there to be had at some great cost,
Mm-hmm.
that it's a flowing dynamic process as life is itself. So that understanding really shifts everything about how you experience what's happening even. Um, some people will say that, I know that there are certain healers who will say that the way to heal your pain is to go into it. Don't try to push it away,
Yeah.
but rather go into it and experience it fully so that you can integrate
Yes.
whatever is going on. And so you understand what needs to shift, what needs to change,
Mm.
um, and thereby find your pathway to healing of it. So if you use that approach, a really good example that I will say about the country I live in, which is the USA, you can probably tell from my accent, for
Mm.
those of you who are international viewers. During this cycle, and I would say cycle because it began probably around as early as, I want to say, 2012, we began to wake up to face the darkness of our that exists in our country and some of the systems that we created in our country. And right now we're facing the horrors of um, systemic racism, what that has done to us as a people, and beginning to think about what do we shift? How do we fix this? It's causing enormous suffering and pain for people. But as long as we can pretend that either that isn't so, that no, it's not that bad,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not experiencing it. I'm not a person of color, so I'm living comfortably in my white privilege. What is there to worry about? Well, there's a plenty to worry about, because I too suffer from the ways I'm disconnected from whatever the people who are in a disadvantaged, or perhaps a lower caste, if you will, uh, which is also a part of it. It's not just uh, race, it's class, it's caste. There's so many disconnects and inequalities that we've created around us as structures that we live in, and we can be blind to how it's affecting everything unless we're willing to face the pain of what it's doing, not just to them, but to us. Like, how is it hurting me to be a privileged person? And there are ways that it does. And we don't have time to go into all that kind of thing in a call like this, but I just want to point that out as one way, one example of how the disconnection from source energy
Mm.
will do for it. If you think source is something that's out there that you have to get, then you've lost all power. You can't recognize what power you have inside yourself to be creative, to plan and prepare and change, grow, develop, all of the things that are important for a healthy human life and for a healthy society, frankly, that um, we need to do our individual work in a waking up and healing and saying, what's going on here? What's going on with me? And what's going on around me that I'm contributing to or I'm part of? So going back to this disconnect from nature, that's really fundamental, because we're composed of all the elements of life, earth, air, fire, water, ether. Those are all the ways that make up us in our physical forms.
Mm-hmm.
Now, um, if you've waked up enough to know that you're not just your physical body or what you experience through that body, but you're way much more than that. And there's science is beginning now to prove it, and prove the various energetic bodies that we have and how they work, how they interact with each other, and then how we in those bodies interact with every other form of energy in the universe. It's massive, and it can really turn your head around in the beginning until you really kind of get it. And it's fun to play with. Once you do that understanding, you get there. I'm having a good time these days. Playing in creative playgrounds with like-minded people, like I met here in the, you mentioned that we had met through Sarah McCrum's work and her really wonderful work on Thank You Money. First the book, and then the course that she's created. I've been doing that work, which is where you and I met with some of our other friends. And that community has been really vital in terms of accelerating, I think, the growth that we're doing as individuals and collectively. But the joy of it is that was a missing piece for me, because I had already worked through the layers of how systemic suffering from lack and scarcity, and how the systems in the world and in many countries, most countries, in fact, are created to keep us from our fullness of our creativity, our joy, and our connectedness. Because if they can disconnect us and make us feel like victims, they can control us. That's the problem. And that's why are we feeling like victims? You know, if you're feeling like a victim, some of us have gone past that, and that's wonderful. The more of us who can, oh, please, let's all go there as quick as we can. That's one of the reasons I wrote my book about healing the wanting, of making that shift from grasping, like, I don't have it. They took it from me. They did these things to me. And so I've got to change that. I got to get out of this some way. And people try all kinds of ways to do that. Obviously, there are many ways to do it. And I'm not saying that there aren't. I don't have one simple answer, but what I do look at is the full picture of what's going on. How did we get here? What can we do about it as collectively, but also as individuals? Because unless we as individuals do our own piece of the healing work, that's how change happens. And until we do it, we're not getting there very fast. And right now, we're all being kicked in the butt. Like, no, we don't get to stand here and say, oh, ain't it awful? I don't like it. We're being prompted and practically forced into changing something for the better. Now, the good side of this is that in that process of healing, we get to be clear about what it could be if it wasn't this way. What if we didn't have to live like this? What if we didn't have to suffer together? What if we didn't have to make each other miserable and try and control somebody else?
And what do you think? What do you think that sense that comes from? That feeling that people put on one another.
Fear. It's plain and simple. It's just fear.
It's just fear. Fear of lack. This sense that we're given this. We're sort of fed this diet of everything's limited, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, someone said it's beautifully, and I love it, and made a meme about it on one of the social medias. It's not a pie that you got to cut up and divide into pieces, and everybody only gets so much of it. It's an endless flow. It's an endless vast field from which everything can be produced. So to break away from this whole concept of limited and putting fences around things and boundaries and things, and this is yours and this is mine. Not like that. It's not like that. And that's a colonial way of thinking, by the way. I got to say that. This is part of how we got to some of the problems that we face in society and in the world, of the limited resources and limited possibilities. Because if you can limit it and you can decide who gets what, then, and you can make people afraid, you can get power over them and you can control them. People try to control you through so many ways. In this country, we've just witnessed one of our so-called leaders, who was in the highest position of power, and the people who follow him have all been entrained by, and this is why they do it, I think, just looking at a more global picture of it, of shame and blame. That that's not only their picture of what's wrong, but it's how you get people to do what you want. You shame them and you blame them and you make them wrong, and it can only be this way. And therefore, I can get what I want, and that isn't working. That never did work. It only worked for a few people for a little while, but it is not a sustainable system. It is breaking down, and thank God.
Yes.
It has to. And so even though we're seeing some really yucky stuff go on in the world, there has to be a breakdown so that we can create something new. And the one thing I will say about that is we get to, Thank you. we're we're all going through the stress and the strain and the suffering, I think,
Mhm.
so that we can get rid of all the things that are keeping us from what is beautiful, what is lovely, what is good
Mm.
and sustainable. Now, the advantage of knowing that we are not separate from nature, for instance, is that we can work cooperatively with nature to create something whose structures and foundations are whole and stable and sane and beautiful and
Yeah.
good and will work for everybody and all the beings of the world, not just humans. And we got to think beyond that, well beyond that, and possibly we will be coming to a place soon. I'm This is coming to me right now. It's like I'm channeling it. That maybe we'll begin to have to think about other beings in other parts of the solar systems and beyond in various other parts of the universe,
Mhm.
because we're making exploration out there. We don't know what we will find. People have said and conjectured for a long time that we're not the only ones here in the universe,
Of
only
course,
conscious sentient beings. And
would be
maybe it makes sense that there would be. I've always thought that probably there are. Many people think we came from the stars, in the first place, and perhaps we did.
Mhm.
And someday we'll meet those people or those beings. So we can't just think about us, our one little finite little self, me here in this moment. We need to expand. We can't do that when the systems are keeping us
Mhm.
under somebody else's power. Okay.
And the vibration of being under this lockdown
Yeah.
is really extreme. The energetic vibration, and I feel like you that this is the old order moving out.
Yeah.
And as
Right.
it goes, it's taking its last little twists.
And well, and trying desperately, because what we're all feeling is the dying pieces who want to keep control are grasping like crazy,
Hmm.
causing a lot more pain and suffering than we really have to have. I mean, if I were going to say one thing to the people of the dying order, it's, there really is a better way. It's not going to be terrible for you
Yeah.
like you think it's going to be. It's going to be really good for everyone.
Mm.
And if I could do anything about that, I would say, just calm the heck down, you know, just let something beautiful emerge and see. Let's see together. What can we do together? And
Mm.
I love the new thing that Sarah is doing. I'm sure that if anyone who's in connection with her will learn about this of um, the future human. What would you just love to do? What would you just love to create? What would you love to see happen in the world?
Mm.
And oh, we so need to be in that conversation, in that inquiry every day, as much of the day as we can. So whatever's happening in for you in the world, take a moment and say, all right, this stinks. What would I rather have instead? What would I just love to see happen here? Instead of, or like right now, what's happening in Texas and other parts of our country, there's horrible suffering because of some storm related systems. What would I love to see about that? Well, I'd love to see some people from outside the area come in and help it and
Mhm.
get help to the people who are freezing and they don't have heat or water or healthy water. Let's do something about that, because it can be done. It's not an impossible thing or a done deal, let's say,
Yeah.
that, oh, these people are suffering and it is awful. No, we can help.
Mm.
And in fact, there are people who know how to work with weather patterns. And I think it's something that I know how to do and probably could teach. I've been so busy, I haven't really had time to focus there. Maybe at some point I will if people want me to. And others know how to do this too, of work co-creatively and consciously with weather patterns so that we can mitigate some of the circumstances, some of the extremes of it. Because frankly, the weather is telling us something. We have to change some things. And we can make it easier by working with it instead of against it or trying to make it stop, because
Yeah.
that's not going to work.
That's not going to work. And it's interesting. I have power versus force up here. We spend so much time pushing against what is, and we've also
Yeah,
got what is. We're that thing that we've been in conflict with for so
right,
for so long, our
right.
species. So Nancy, what would you love? That question, if you could create anything, how, just, yeah, give our listeners an example of what that sounds like.
I would love to create a beautiful, safe world where everybody feels confident and empowered to do what they love and make their contributions in a playful way that is joyful and healthy,
Mm-hmm.
um, so that we together, just being together and working co-creatively together is an enormous fuel that we haven't seen for I don't know when, probably from the very beginnings of when the earth was formed, that people and all beings did work together in those ways. I would love not a return to that, but I'd like a renaissance, a renewal, so that we can remember what brilliant light lives within us. Every being on the planet, including all the other species, can remember the light they have and that they carry, and they can be who they came to be here. In that world, amazing things will happen that no one even considered possible because they just didn't have the imagination. But together, when we're not spending all our energy trying to fight or push back what's hurting us, when we're able and free to be grounded in the flow of life energy, life force, everything is possible. All good things are possible. And that's what I would love to see. And I would love to invite others to come along on that journey
Yeah.
and be part of it. You know, nobody can do this alone.
Of course,
Um,
I was about to say this is a paradigm shift, and
yes.
this is about consciousness. This whole summit is about changing the way we view
Mhm.
money, for example, but just our society and how we are.
Right.
And while we hold the old paradigm and we hold the old concepts, we're never going to move. So it just does take person by person, community by community, more of us to wake up, to remember, to just choose actually to do it
Yes.
differently. And also I love what you said at the beginning about knowing that we have this in us already. We have so much abundance in this precise moment. Even the people who are in Texas, what's happening in Texas today,
Hmm.
they've got roofs over their heads. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, we as a species we're so fortunate. We have created so much, but
Yes,
we've
we
done
have.
it in this very conflicting kind of a way and constricting.
Yes. So this is not to say that all conflict is bad, because some of it produces action, you
Yes.
know, and there's certain virtues about that. But what I'm interested in creating is something that is makes people wake up eagerly and saying, I can't wait to
Mm.
get started on this. I love playing here. I love my life. I love the people that I'm with. I love the people I get to connect with.
Mhm.
And it just grows, that no matter how good it is, that it gets better and better and better.
Mm.
So that's what I'm invested in. That's why I'm here. That's all the things that I'm doing.
Beautiful.
And one of the things that I have a gift to offer, and I think you were going to talk about that too, that the gift that I'm offering for people to read today is something I wrote a few years back as part of the material I was trying to get out, all of the things that I want to say, and part of it is that um, on the topic of scarcity, uh, there are certain categories of resources that we have, and this is something that Thank You Money works with as well. And I was even beginning to think that this energy of when I tap into the universe or source,
Mhm.
it's not very, or working with nature intelligence either, for instance, is not very different from working with the energy of money. I have found that I don't know, I can't tell you right now if they're separate things,
Mm.
because they feel so similar. They work very much the same way, because they're all very creative and very life-giving. Um, so I put together a book called The Four Currencies of Life. And that was written, probably a couple of decades ago originally. And I've updated it since then, because in that time since then, there are, of course, many different forms of currencies. Like we didn't have such things as cryptocurrencies then. And now we have that's proliferating. That's a whole new thing that's come into being. And I categorize all of, I lump them into four categories just to make it simple, because there's ways of interacting with each of these resources in new ways that can increase and open up all kinds of possibilities for us. Like the four currencies that I talk about, I've categorized into money, which comprises all forms of currencies, coin and dollar bills and gold and silver and that kind of category of things. Time, relationships, and creativity. So the thing is that they can be exchanged one for the other. You can, the simple formula that everybody knows about is you can trade time for money. You go to work for somebody and they pay you. That is the simplest form. But there's so many other ways that you can interact with all these currencies and exchange one for the other. You can sell your ideas and get money for that, or get goods or services for that. And in this little book, I talk about all of the different ways that can happen. So the point being, we don't have to see things as a lack, because everybody has something. If you have nothing but time, that's still a huge resource. And even though it has structural limits to it, everybody only has 24 of them a day. Those are still 24 units you could use for something, and you could exchange to get something else that you want by investing your time in an aligned way, and with working out with other people. What do they want, so that you can exchange in an equal, balanced way, that you get something you want and I get something I want. Everybody is better off for it. So, and this is happening a lot, right now, because people have lost jobs. They're unable to work because of their places of business have been shut down due to COVID. They've been forced to create new ways of thinking about things. And I hope this book helps them. And I think it will, of just beginning to think a little bit differently about what can you do in these strange circumstances that we find ourselves in, and realize that there's a whole lot that you can do, and you have more than you think you do. Definitely. So that, and the point of my book of Healing the Wanting, is that the real remedy to scarcity is not to feed the lack, but to be grateful for what there is and let that grow. It's along the lines of the old, many people have probably heard this one, story about the indigenous grandfather who was talking with a younger relative about there being a war going on inside of him, and he wasn't sure which way it was going to go. And he says, well, what is that war about? And he says, well, I have a bad wolf that tries to cause trouble, and there's a good wolf that's trying to do good things and try to get me to feel better. And the younger person says, well, which one is winning? And then he says, well, it depends on which one I feed. So often I ask myself every day, which wolf am I feeding today? If I feed the energy that wants to create something good, if I stay with what would I love to see? How would I like this to become? Really good things happen. And that's what I want for you. I want for the world. And I invite everyone to jump into that playground, because it's worth being there. That's worth the investment.
Absolutely. We do live in an unlimited universe, and it is just a case of where we want to put our attention, like you say. I've just finished reading Nancy's book, and that is the free gift that she's giving. So I really recommend you have a look at it. And and have just a different way of perceiving things, because we have had this sense, as Nancy was saying at the beginning, that we've got to do it all ourselves. But actually, collaboration and community and working together and bringing our different skills, our different resources together, that's what's going to make a difference and stop this sense of isolation.
Yes, we're not in this alone. We are doing it together, even if they're on the other side of the world, like you're in England and I'm in the US, and many of our friends are scattered all around the world. And yet we connect very meaningfully. We're doing some wonderful things together,
Yeah,
and we will continue to, that way will continue. That's going to grow.
absolutely. And when the little pockets of community, they start to move toward, a few more pop up, and eventually they cluster, and then they cluster, and then they cluster, and they'll get bigger, and they'll get bigger. And we will shift consciousness by coming together and by seeing opportunity rather than fear and lack, definitely.
Yes, indeed. So let's connect more with those people who are working towards doing something better,
Yeah,
who are providing fuel for that good wolf, you know,
absolutely. Well,
the
this summit
better
has
wolf.
been full of speakers from all over the place, all actually singing from the same hymn sheet at the end of the day. We're all saying the same thing. So please click on the links, join the communities, let's all gather together and let's make a difference in this world.
Thank you so much for the time today.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. It's just always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here.
Thank you.